Hello everyone, welcome back to the Highland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got another tropical pitcher plant spotlight for you guys today, and this one is a little bit different than most that I do, because typically we're covering species in these spotlights, the naturally occurring lineages out there, and all the ways that they are cool. But this one, it is naturally occurring, but it is not a species. Instead, this is a natural hybrid that occurs on a very select group of mountains in northeastern Borneo, and that is Nepenthes trusmadiensis, a gigantic, once it's mature at least, tropical pitcher plant hybrid, naturally occurs, and it is a cross between Nepenthes lowii and macrophylla, two of the kind of slowest growing and also most sought after species out there because they are just weird looking plants. So both of those parent species, lowii is a fairly widespread plant, and hopefully in the next couple years I'll be able to cover mine when it looks a whole lot better than it does. Widespread plant found on many different mountains within kind of the northeastern quarter of Borneo. Macrophylla, on the other hand, is only found on Mount Trusmadi and one or two neighboring mountaintops in very far northeast Borneo. Trusmadi National Park is kind of just adjacent of Kinabalu National Park, where species like Edwardsiana and Velosa and stuff grow, and Macrophylla actually used to be considered a subspecies of Edwardsiana, but it has been rightly recognized as its own distinct species. But you cross the two of them and you get these guys. In some places on those mountaintops, these guys are actually more common in hybrid swarms than either of the pure parent species. So these guys naturally grow usually either as terrestrials in very open, kind of stunted montane forest, or they will also grow as epiphytes on the moss pads and such that collect in those cloud forests. A species like this, or a hybrid like this, one plant may very well never touch the ground in its life. And these guys can live for centuries up there. They are very slow growing, they get huge, and once they're established, they are around for a very long time. So they are found typically above 1,500 meters in elevation, so well above 5,000 feet in elevation, in places where it is pretty much always very cool, humid, kind of foggy, torrential rains, and bright sunshine when it comes through because of the high elevation. And these guys have, like both of their parents, very, very sturdy, kind of brittle, woody leaves. It takes after lowii and having these kind of arching, kind of slender leaves like this, and a very thick stem that it attaches to on a decurrent attachment. That means the leaf kind of travels down and wraps around the base of the stem there. But these leaves can grow to be well over a foot and a half long on mature plants. Macrophylla means large leaf, and these guys take that trait from that parent. They can have very, very big leaves. And then, of course, off the end, you get their amazing pitchers. Lower pitchers, like I've got here, they are very similar to your standard lowii pitcher in that they've got kind of an ovate base. It narrows slightly above a very, very indistinctive hip that's right down here, and it becomes narrow and either cylindrical or very slightly funnel-shaped up to the mouth. They have relatively small wings along the front, very slightly fringed, and then the peristome is what really attracts these guys. On lower pitchers, it's pretty wide and very curved both into the mouth and around the sides of the pitcher, and it is lined in a whole bunch of very tiny but very well pronounced ridges that end in pretty long teeth. Those teeth, of course, are mostly inherited from Macrophylla, very toothy species, but the increase of a number of ribs and actually the increased length of those teeth actually comes from lowii, so they kind of merge really well with each other. The coloration on these guys is usually this kind of rich maroonish red. The peristome often has these fading stripes of red, yellow, and orange on them. Depending on exactly what traits the parentage was carrying will vary, of course, how the offspring, the hybrid, looks. But that is your general appearance. And the lower pitchers, they can be quite large at times. not as large as the uppers, but they can reach up to a foot or so in height. So it's a pretty large plant. And they are very tough, woody pitchers. So they last a long, long time. You can see some of these older traps that are only halfway dead here. These have been around for almost a year at this point. So slow growing plant. Those are only a couple of leaves back, but those pitchers, they can last many, many months. And certainly in full quality, full beauty here, they can be around for 3, 4, 5 months at this stage. Now, these guys, of course, are best known for their upper pitchers because on the parent species, the upper pitchers are the most wild. Lowia, of course, has its famous kind of hourglass woody pitchers with its big, broad, colorful mouth, and that does translate into the hybrid. I've got a couple of photos that I'll put in here from, I've taken photos from a friend's greenhouse where they do have mature traps on trusmadiensis plants. Those traps can get to more than 14, 15 inches tall, and they have kind of the same relatively cylindrical, slightly more globose bottom to those pitchers, but relatively cylindrical otherwise. It does flare out as it goes up towards the mouth of the pitcher. And then, of course, it has a big, huge teardrop-shaped mouth that's broad and flared out and lined with a very, very distinctive, very toothy peristome. It's a little thinner relative to the size of the pitcher than the lower pitcher peristomes, but the teeth are much more individualized, separate out, and very pronounced. So it's a very spectacular and kind of creepy looking pitcher. Now in the wild, those upper pitchers actually act very much like both the Lowii and macrophylla traps do in that they interact with the tree shrews out there. The lids are relatively large and they produce copious amounts of nectar. They don't quite usually manage to produce the kind of whitish exudate that Lowii pitchers produce, but they do produce a lot of liquid under here. And they produce enough that the tree shrews, they'll come up and they'll eat that, and that big broad mouth is just wide enough to be able to kind of span the length of the tree shrew so that as it's licking the nectar off the top of the lid, it's pooping into the pitcher, and that's where the plant actually gets most of its nutrients from. It will capture insects that fall in there or fly in, attracted to the nectar and stuff, but a lot of it comes from defecation from those small mammals. So it is a very, very impressive plant, and of course, once those big pitchers are produced, it's on a vine that might be 6, 7, 8 feet to start, but at maturity, you may have vines that can reach well over 40 feet in length. Plants that can be over 200 years old at that point sometimes. So huge, impressive plant, amazing coloration when they start getting produced. Now, because it is such an impressive, slow-growing, and also sought-after plant, it is rare and quite expensive still in cultivation. A tiny little seed-grown plant may still go for more than $80, $100, and of course a plant of this size even will start asking for sometimes $300, $400 a piece. So it is quite an expensive and sought-after plant, and it is also one that you have to take very special care of in order to do well with it. Again, these are a highland plant, and they grow in very loose, mossy soils, so you have to replicate that in cultivation. Start off with the soil needs to be preferably like a 1-to-1-to-1 long fiber sphagnum, perlite or pumice, and maybe orchid bark or large chunky cocoa chips in order to make sure it's a very moisture retentive but also loose airy soil so that the roots can spread out through that and be happy. And you want to make sure to keep it just moist. Again, because they're in those loose soils on the moss pads on the trees, it's constantly wet almost, but whenever the sun comes out and dries it up for a day, those moss pads will sometimes dry almost all the way out, and the plant kind of expects that to help get air in through the soil. So you want to just water it whenever the plant starts, or whenever the top of the soil starts getting slightly dry. If you have long fiber living sphagnum moss that is growing on the top here, it'll act kind of like a signal to you Once that starts to really look dry, you can go in and just lightly water it. The top, that living moss will dry out faster than the moss underneath will, so you want to make sure to just lightly water the top, and that will just kind of keep the whole thing kind of moderately moist at all times. You want to give these guys very, very bright light, because again, it may be a cloud forest up there, and rainstorms and fog are going through all the time, but there will still be fairly bright light coming through that because of the high elevation. And of course, whenever that does clear and these guys get blasted with full sun, it is very strong. So you want to give them as bright a light as you can. If you're giving them something like full sun, maybe put a slight shade cloth or slightly dappled light over that, so that they're not completely burnt in cultivation. Wild plants can tolerate a little more usually because the conditions there are more exact to what they want. In cultivation, we want to tone it back just a pinch, but very strong artificial lights will usually do what you need for these guys. And you will be able to tell that they are happy because they will have relatively thin, very sturdy, almost woody leaves. If they've got that, then they're probably getting enough light. If you see them starting to blush or blotch red, you may want to pull it back just a little bit, reduce the lighting. But you want to make sure it stays nice and bright. And then, of course, probably the most important long-term thing is that these guys need cool temperatures at all times in order to grow well. Daytime temperatures that preferably don't get above 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you can manage it, don't let it get above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Kind of the mid-70s during the day is really best for these guys. They'll even take sometimes cooler than that during the day. And then at night, you want to drop temperatures preferably down to the very low 60s, even better into the mid-50s Fahrenheit in order to keep these guys long-term. If you keep them warmer than that, eventually you will have a plant that starts to collapse and die on itself because it's basically burning through its metabolism. It's using up all of its nutrient reserves faster than it can reproduce that, and faster than like the genetic mechanisms in here can actually like repair DNA damage and stuff. So you get a plant that eventually starts to shrink and collapse if it's kept too warm. Kept cool, it will be a slow grower, but it will be a healthy grower. And you will have this plant for a very, very long time. Now again, if you get a little seedling, it's going to be probably 5-6 years minimum before you get full-size mature lower traps, and then another year or two after that before the plant starts to really vine and you get those famous, fantastic uppers. But once you get that, very impressive. And if you're lucky, you may get a plant that will seasonally produce big flower stalks. If it flowers, of course, you need both a male and a female to produce seeds. But since this is a hybrid, it's kind of hard to produce anything that is going to exactly match the parents when you cross it, even with another trusmadiensis clone. You will get a broad variation of plants that some will look more like lowii, some will look like your standard right in between trusmadiensis. Some of them will end up looking more like a funky, kind of wonky macrophylla instead. And some of the quote-unquote macrophylla clones out there right now may actually be instead intragress trusmadiensis plants. And it's made pretty obvious when those upper pictures especially start to get really wonky, folded peristomes with thinner teeth and such. But certainly this is going to be a little bit less expensive plant than macrophylla, and it's going to be a larger, slightly faster growing plant than lowii, so it's a good option if you want to get traits of both, but you don't quite have the conditions or maybe patience to really grow either parent plant well. So if you get one of these, certainly a worthwhile plant to pick up. Now that is about all that I have for that plant. Certainly if you have questions, if there's anything that I've missed, you can leave those down in the comments below. If you'd like to learn more about the plants and animals and stuff that I work with here, you can always find photos and video tidbits on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. at Carlton Carnivores. You can find also the database and blog at my website at carltoncarnivores.com. If you would like to help support the production of educational videos like this, first off, simply subscribing to the channel and watching the videos all the way through really does help boost things up, so that helps a lot. But if you'd like to also help in a more financial manner, consider buying some of the plants that I have available at my website shop. Or you can become a Patreon member where you get early access to these videos, access to the monthly seed contests that I do, and also exclusive merchandise and a few other bonus kickbacks as well. You can also, if you don't want to sign up for a monthly donation plan, you can do one-time donations there or at coffee.com. You can also simply contact me for other ways if you'd like to help donate. Most of the links for these things will be in the video description below, but until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.